Culture evolves at the speed of light, just like your financial needs. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you in the know and ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve. We'll help you monitor your progress and give personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals and find your way to money. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Going on vacation? We're here for it. With kids who turn the back seat into a courtroom drama over whose tablet is louder, whose charger is faster, and why watching the same cartoon for the 100th time is a human right? Yep, we totally have vehicles to handle that. Because whether it's a road trip or a business trip, where your flight's delayed, your phone's at 2%, and your dinner, whatever's open, yeah, here for that too. Enterprise, we're here for it.
Hey there, travelers. Kaylee Cuoco here. Sorry to interrupt your music, great artist BT Dubs, but wouldn't you rather be there to hear it live? With Priceline, you can get out of your dreams and into your dream concert. They've got millions of travel deals to get you to that festival, gig, rave, sound bath, or sonic experience you've been dreaming of. Download the Priceline app today, and you can save up to 60% off hotels and up to 50% off flights. So don't just dream about that trip. Book it with Priceline.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
You're listening to...
They're going to call it a hard foul. They're going to call it a hard
foul. Celtics roster. Which player would you most want to hang out with?
Luke Kornet.
All right, that's a good answer. How come?
Because I feel like he's dumb enough to just get shit-faced at the bar.
Yeah, his celebrations on the bench are unbelievable. You know, when there's a great dunk and he just jumps off the bench. He looks like just a running dad joke. You know, and I'm kind of with you. It would be him with Derek White.
Mike, it looks like the only choice left now is to drink with Derek White. And is Sam Adams there because Luke is gone, and that was recorded, I think, was it, if not last season or the season before last. It wasn't this past season, but it was either the season before that or 2 seasons ago. And at that point, he wasn't the player he became and is now and is going to be for the San Antonio Spurs. We are Hard Foul, and we're brought to you by the what?
Fans First Sports Network, bitches. Hugo Gonzalez, he's not old enough to drink, but if I went to Real Madrid with him in Spain, would he be of the drinking age?
18, yeah. So
he looks like a good time. I bet he's a lot of fun to go out with.
And by the way, it's not Hugo, it's Hugo. There's no age.
I'm calling him Hugo.
Yeah, no. He sounds like a communist dictator. Hugo Gonzalez.
And the Celtics are going to be bad next year.
They're going to be bad. I'm Jim Quigley with my brother Michael. Mike, we are July 3rd. It's July 3rd, 10:36 a.m.
Celtics are going to suck.
Still not signed. There's been no major trades done by the Celtics. The only 2 signings the Celtics have made have been for Luke Kornet and Josh Minot. 2 guys that did not play for the Minnesota Timberwolves last year.
Don't pretend like you know who they are either on this pod. Don't be like, I know, I've looked up these guys. And
I don't. I knew about Gosler a little bit at Iowa. Beyond that, I didn't even know he was still in the league.
You didn't know he was from Iowa until you saw it on Twitter.
Well, I remember from the draft. But Minot, I know nothing about. I guess both of them potentially could be good offensive players. I don't know. Beyond that, not a lot happening. Luke Kornet to the San Antonio Spurs. And, Mike, you take it away. There has been word. I feel like that it's from every Celtics beat reporter right now is basically saying that the mission is to get under the first apron. And it just feels like that's what they're trying to do. That's what the goal is here. To get it out of luxury tax penalty hell, for the owners. It doesn't really impact the basketball decisions, I don't think. But you've heard it from Forsberg. You've heard it from Brian Robb. You've heard it from Jay King. I'm sure I'm missing people here, but that certainly feels like what the appetite is of management, which I'm guessing is the directive from ownership. So your thoughts on just what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and what they look like, and you already said how much they're going to suck.
Yeah, they're going to suck. They're going to suck real bad. They're going to have Kada starting at center next year. That's how bad they're going to suck. Dude, I don't know. I mean, when they made this last signing, that put him back over the second apron. So they're going to have to attach draft picks to trades to dump salary in order to, get under the first apron, which I think the goal is. So you have to think Niang and Simons or Simons. They're probably on their way out, just a matter of time. Probably without getting much back, which means
I don't think either one has Niang probably has a little bit more value than Simons, honestly.
So they'll probably just bring in some other guys we never heard of, and we'll see Jordan Walsh running around out there next year with Xavier Tillman. As far as the direction of ownership, I get it. To think they're being cheap to get under the first apron because they're probably going to do that for 2 years in a row. And the word of the day from Brad Stevens is financial flexibility. That's what you hear from teams that aren't going to spend money. They talk about financial flexibility. That becomes the key phrase. You hear it a lot with the Red Sox, for example. They're always talking about financial flexibility when they, move contracts. It could be a pretty tough 2 years as far as just kind of silence around adding to this team. And part of me understands because I've read a little bit about when you are a repeater in the tax, or if you go into the second apron and stay there, what can happen? They can freeze draft picks.
Only if you're in the second apron. So the basketball penalties are just second apron. Everything else is just monetary.
So if they go below the first apron, then it's not about basketball at all. It's about not spending money, which I don't understand, because in the first apron you can still aggregate contracts to make trades. You can still be very competitive, but Jim, it just doesn't feel like that's who they are right now. It feels like they want to save money for these next 2 seasons, and they viewed their window as these previous 2 seasons of trying to go all in for back-to-back championships and then kind of moving in a new direction. So maybe this would have been done whether Tatum was hurt or not, because this feels pretty intentional and they've known this was going to be going on for a long time. I don't believe Brad Stevens when he says, recently I saw the second apron penalties and I was like, what is this?
Yeah, he knew.
He knew.
Yeah,
I mean, Jim, they're being so cheap that there's rumors out there that they drafted Gonzalez because they wouldn't have to pay him the full rookie scale, which is 120% more than what they are guaranteed. So he's only coming.
Why wouldn't they have to pay him the full rookie scale?
Because he's willing to come here and just play for the $2 million. He wouldn't fight to negotiate for the full rookie scale, and that's part of the reason they drafted him. And so that rumor tells me that maybe there was more talented players on the board and they didn't draft them. And then they traded out their second round pick, which was early in the second round, to draft guys who they put on 2-way contracts who don't count against the cap at all. So this all tells me that they're kind of cheaping out. They're not going to spend money. And it would piss me off if it's true that they use the first round draft pick on a kid that they don't really believe in because they could save money.
I'm hesitant to say they don't really believe in him. It sounds like they've been scouting him for a long time, and there were enough draftees or draft experts or whatever the hell you want to call them, and I'm certainly not one. Whoever you pick at 28, I'm not getting excited about it or down on, because I don't know enough to give any opinion on that. But there was enough people out there that are saying that this kid was potentially a steal. That it was a very high upside, worthy of a swing pick. And for me, if you're not going to be a contending team, then why not take a high upside grand slam type swing at this for a pick like this? So I'm not comfortable criticizing them for that until I see what the player is, and if the player, Mike, is not very good, and we see guys that were better that were drafted after, then I think absolutely open for criticism. I'm just worried here that you have two max players. Tatum's max, super max kicks in not this season, but the following season. And you're willing to, two top 20 players, and you're already losing one season because of Tatum's injury, that you're willing now to sacrifice at least 2 seasons of not trying to build around these guys. Why the clock is really now begun ticking and faster than we thought it was going to because of Tatum's injury. So in some regards, we started talking about the offseason and we mentioned, do you trade Brown? Do you trade White? And if they decided to go down that road, that's almost like basketball decisions, Mike. More than, even if it saved them money, they're saying, hey, we don't know how we rebuild this with the cap restraints and to make a championship team around Tatum and Brown. So, we're going to go out and try to figure out how do we bring in assets? How do we bring in maybe a young all-star? And then 2-3 seasons, we're right back in this thing. They flirted with it. They didn't really do that. Maybe they still will. But I'm really wondering what the direction is. Like, what is the team going to look like in 2 years? How are they going to be built? We talk about if it really isn't onus to get under this first apron, then you want to trade Niang, you want to trade Simons, maybe you throw Tillman in there, and you would have to give him picks. You'd have to give up picks. So you're not really in a rebuild if you're giving up picks. But if you're not in a rebuild, then that's saying you're willing to spend next season, but you're not really. So what are you doing? Like, I don't understand what they're doing from a basketball perspective, other than like trying to pretend that they're not being a mediocre team. And look, you already lost Kornet, who I thought really paired well with Tatum. The easiest way to still get under the apron would be to trade Hauser and to tax into a mid-level tax. And there's still teams out there that can take him. But again, that would be biting off your nose to spite your face, cutting off your nose to spite, because he pairs well with Tatum and Brown. He's he doesn't need the ball. He can defend at a decent enough level. He has a skill set that is completely unique in the league. He's a bargain price when you look at what Duncan Robinson just got. And so if they go down the road and they actually trade him, Mike, I think the message that sends now is that this is not about what's going to be on the floor. This is completely about getting under that tax line. And so that's a guy I'm drawing a circle around. If they trade Hauser, then it's to me, it's like waving a white flag.
See, that was the opposite when they let Luke Kornet walk for that contract. To me, that was waving the white flag, because you literally don't have an NBA level center on your roster.
But there was no way for them to match that contract. So, like, in some ways, like, even if they want to be a contender in 2 years, there's no mechanism for them to match that contract for Kornet.
Yeah, I mean, I would have traded Hauser to keep him.
You could have done that.
That's what I would have.
You could have done that.
I mean, they don't have any plan at that position. You talk about not a plan for the roster. They don't have a plan for that position. They don't have a power forward on the roster right now that can play. I mean, you look at this roster currently, and you could go through it and name a bunch of guys who probably won't be on an NBA roster next season, you could argue. Is Jordan Walsh good enough to be on an NBA roster? Is Xavier Tillman good enough to be on an NBA roster? The 2 guys they just signed, are they actually good enough to be on an NBA roster?
I don't know yet.
Is J.D. Davidson good enough to be on an NBA roster?
I don't think J.D. Davidson will be on this roster, but
I mean, you just go down the line of the number of guys on this team, and some of them, I mean, Neemias Queta is borderline. He's good enough to be on an NBA roster. Is he good enough to be getting minutes?
I do think,
because he's higher
Queta than probably most people, but
he's going to be starting.
Yeah,
he's going to be a starting center. I don't think he's played more than 50 games in the season in his career.
I don't have a huge problem. I'd like something better, but I'd
like something a lot better for.
I think
the Boston Celtics.
I think we could be talking about him being in a Luke Kornet type conversation by the end of next season.
We'll see.
Yeah.
we'll see, because Luke Kornet was never thrown into the starting role and told you're forced to be the starter. He had time to develop as a backup, and Cater didn't even get those minutes last year to properly develop. And so your argument was right about him. If this was going to be the case for this year, he should have played more last year. Yeah, this roster, I agree, doesn't have a lot of direction, and I already feel like with or without Hauser, they've already raised the white flag. I'll be pissed at this point if they trade Hauser. And I was a proponent for letting him go to keep other guys. I'd rather have Kornet, but if they trade Hauser and they hold on to Niang and Simons, who are going to walk at the end of the season, it's just like everybody keeps saying the offseason of 2027 is when they're going to spend the money.
That's such a huge roll of the dice. You don't know who's going to be. I don't care who's might be a free agent now. Everyone gets re-signed.
Everybody does.
Gets extended. Like you have no idea what that's going to look like. And what do they have for assets to trade?
And how old is Jaylen Brown going to be in 2027? How old is
Derek White? Will be 33.
Yeah, so
and you'd be 3 years into Jaylen Brown's supermax. You're just wasting years. You're wasting a top 20 players' years. Like that's 2 top 20 players. You're wasting their years.
And so for me, if I'm Brad Stevens and the plan is to stay under the tax for 2 straight seasons, then I'm going to ownership and I'm saying we should be trading Jaylen Brown and Derek White.
I think there's something to that. Yeah.
Because, if you're telling me you don't want to compete in 2020, now if we want to compete when Tatum comes back in 26, I'll hold on to these guys. But if you're telling me, we are going to wait till 2027, we need to start rebuilding that roster for Jason Tatum now. And our best possibility to do that is to trade these 2 guys right now. We will get a lot back for Derek White. We will get a lot back for Jaylen Brown. And it won't just be draft picks. We'll get the draft capital we need to draft early and often and, make good trades. But you will get other pieces back. But there would be some urgency to that to do it right now because teams are filling out their rosters, as you know, pretty quickly here. And I would be concerned if the plan is to be under the first apron for 2 straight seasons and bring all these guys back. I think that'll end up in disaster.
Yeah, I like it. I want to hedge a little bit because, I don't think we really don't have an idea of what type of player Gonzalez is or Minot or Gaza. And, the Celtics scouting has been as good as anybody in the league, especially the back end of the draft and into the second round and some of these fringe players that they bring in and get something out of. So maybe some of these guys do fit, but there's such unknowns. Right now it's a no because you don't know how they'll look or what they'll be like with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And one thing this roster is going to need when Tatum comes back is depth. They're going to need, he's not going to be able to play 70 games. Brown's not going to play 70 games. So you're going to need some depth. I mean, this roster right now has none of it.
Yep.
Shireman's still an unknown. We think we might like him, but we don't really know. Beyond Sam Hauser on that bench. And right now I would actually pencil Sam Hauser as a starter on this team. I think your starter is probably Cater, Hauser, Brown, either Pritchard or Simons and White. I don't think Niang's starting. So you don't really have much depth to build around. You don't know what it's going to look like. And if you don't have any resources next year, like if you got under the first apron this year and then next year you're using it to use your mid-level and you're using it to make trades and you get back over it and you build a roster. Like I don't expect them necessarily to be a championship team when Tatum comes back next year, but I want them to build a team that's going to be pretty good, that's going to have some depth, and we're actually building towards something for potentially 27. You could see that next step being made. I think that's going to be hard to do if you have to stay below that first apron. And especially when we're talking right now, the salary gets tougher next year because Tatum's Supermax kicks in next season. It hasn't kicked in yet. He's still at like $40 million right now. So like it jumps even more of what Brown and Tatum are taking up on that cap. So your margin for error gets even smaller on what you can build around them. And to your point, maybe the move would have been, maybe it still is. Again, I want to hedge here. Maybe the deals for Brown just weren't good enough. Maybe it is just the Kings offering, Keegan Murray and a bunch of picks, and that's in like Levine and Sabonis, and that's not good enough. And maybe they're waiting to see what happens, and things open up next offseason or by the All-Star break or whatever. But it's discouraging for new ownership. And I think we need to remind people, Mike, that bought this team for $6 billion fucking dollars, that money is a motivating factor on how we're building this team.
Yeah, it feels that
$6 billion with a B. Billion.
Oh.
And money is the motivating factor on how we're going to build this team.
Well, maybe they'll spend money now that the federal government's going to give them a huge tax incentive to be a billionaire. It's been a rough offseason. This team is going to fucking blow. They're going to be really bad. I just don't see. I mean, there's a lack of talent, man. There's a real lack of talent after Jaylen Brown and Derek White. And if one of those guys go down with an injury, this is why I'm leaning into a little bit more of moving on from those two and getting in the lottery and rebuilding, because it almost feels like that's the smart way to run an NBA franchise right now, with the way things are and how constrained you are. And if you have an ownership that doesn't want to spend money, that's kind of how you have to operate. And if they were able to move those contracts, they would be able to be creative and build a team around Tatum, where if they're not going to spend any money with White and Brown on the roster, I don't see how they cross that finish line again. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess what they would come back to you and say is that 27 is, they'll dip back in and spend again once they're out of this luxury tax, repeated tax penalty. 27 is a long way away. It's 2 seasons. We don't know what the Brown and Tatum are going to look like from a health standpoint. We don't know what is going to be available out on the market. It's really rolling the dice on things. I would still, Mike, hey, if this is the way they're going to go, I think you're right. I think you have to continue to listen on those two guys. To me, though, I'm not rushing to get them out the door. You need a Mikal Bridges type offer for Derek White or something along those lines, because I just think he holds value to whatever team he's going to. It's going to be along that type of line. He means that much. I think he's a better player than Bridges. And then Brown, I need a guy that looks like he's an emerging young all-star and a shitload of draft picks. That's the type of deal I would need for Brown. I don't want a veteran borderline all-star and a boatload of draft picks. That does nothing for me. It needs to be a young guy that I think could step up in 2 seasons and project to be like a real emerging star in this league that I'm either going to keep or I'm going to move on for something bigger and better. So that would be my line there. And I do think, Mike, I do think they're listening, at least, on these guys. I think Brad sees it the same way you do, if you want me to be honest. Otherwise, they would have shut down every one of these rumors prior to the draft. They did not.
I would think like they have to be operating like that, because like you operated in this way that like you didn't even hold on to Porzingis to the trade deadline, and so you just did it. Like you just handed him away with no value attached to him. I just hate the way they're operating right now. I mean,
yeah, I didn't mind those trades as much. I thought they got okay back for that. I just
Well, the Porzingis one, they got nothing. They got nothing back for Porzingis.
Well, they didn't attach anything, I should say, where I think that's what everyone was predicting was going to happen, is that they were going to attach currency, which I don't want to see them do. And I don't want to, like, let's say they trade this to their emphasis to get on the first apron. They trade Simons and they trade Niang and Tillman and they attach a pick. Let's say they attach a future first, protected, whatever. And they get a player back like Marcus Smart. I'm just using him as an example, and maybe one other type player. You can make an argument that Simons is the best player in that deal. And they're giving up a fucking draft pick.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how terrible that is. That's just bad business. It's bad business. I'm just kind of stumped here on how they're going to move forward. I'm really concerned, Mike, that it's going to end up being Hauser, because Brad's going to see that as bad business, and he's right. And the better business will be to give up Hauser. But I think you're really hurting your team. You're hurting yourself. And you're sending a really bad message to your superstars.
They trade him. They have a roster with like absolutely zero shooting outside of like 2 guys next season.
And you don't find his skill set. I think I get what you're saying. You would have rather have Kornet, but Kornet was a free agent. Hauser wasn't. So you would have had to have moved him to sign Kornet. It was difficult. So, and Hauser's skill set, quite honestly, is much harder to find than Kornet's. Kornet's, you can actually, maybe it's this kid from Kentucky where you can draft and develop and you can turn into this in a year or two. Hauser, those guys don't fall out of trees. There's 4 or 5 of them in the league with that skill set. So, I'm just concerned that's what they're going to end up doing. And I would just find that to be hugely disappointing, because he's a guy that you could trade and get a pick back and not have to take anything else on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not great. Want to go around the league?
Hey, I just want to do an exercise with you real quick. And we talk about how badly the Celtics team is right now. Teams that are better than them. And just let's rank it in the East. So you have Milwaukee, I would say, is definitely better than them right now.
Yes.
I would say the Knicks, that are definitely better than them right now. I would say Cleveland, definitely better than them right now. I would say Orlando, definitely better than them right now. I would say Atlanta is better than them right now. So there's 5 teams right off the top of my head. And then you have in the mix of...
Detroit Pistons are better than them.
Detroit Pistons, so that's 6 teams. And then you have a mix of Indiana, Philadelphia, and I think I'm missing someone else. So we're talking your 6 teams that are better than you. So 7th best in the East, maybe projected.
Toronto might be better.
Toronto could... So you're in the mix with Toronto, Indiana...
Miami. Well, Miami didn't do
Miami, but that grouping there, that grouping that maybe you could get up to 4 or 5, but you could also easily be 11 or 12. It's not good. It's really, they're not even like a mediocre team they're barely mediocre in the East. That's really fucking bad. That's the reality of the Celtics situation. Yeah, let's go around the league. Who's had the best offseason?
Living with schizophrenia isn't easy, especially when you're not getting relief from some of your symptoms. It can be hard when you're still dealing with symptoms, like hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there. And negative symptoms, like feeling unmotivated or avoiding social situations. If this sounds familiar, it might be time to talk to your healthcare provider and explore a different kind of schizophrenia treatment. Discover your possibilities at treatingscz.com.
Get your mother-loving ears on, because your big-time radio DJ's got news. PayPal lets you pay for stuff in-store, online, or over time. Now that's a tune. You can pay your own way. Don't just pay, baby. PayPal.
Learn more at PayPal.com. Now at Chipotle, our all-new Chipotle Honey Chicken brings Chipotle heat with a touch of sweet. Seared smoked peppers and savory Mexican spices, blended with a hint of pure honey for a perfectly balanced sauce. All combined with fresh, tender chicken hot off the grill, served up in your favorite burrito or bowl. New Chipotle Honey Chicken takes heat and sweet to a whole new level. But it's only at Chipotle for a limited time. Order now in the app for pickup or delivery. Chipotle, for real.
This episode is brought to you by Pacifico. Here's a story you've probably never heard. Legend has it, decades ago, a couple surfers went down to Mexico in search of epic swells, but they found something unexpected instead. It was still crisp, lively, and smooth, but it had nothing to do with waves. It was Pacifico, a delicious Mexican lager. It's like it was brewed to be discovered. Pacifico, find your own way. 21 plus, discover responsibly. Pacifico Clara Beer, imported by Crown Import, Chicago, Illinois.
I think.
I like Denver's. Denver's had a good offseason. I obviously like Atlanta.
Yep.
I really like the kid that Charlotte drafted. And I thought Charlotte has made some smart moves to move in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, Houston, I really like their offseason, but I'm a little confused on why they brought in Clint Capella. That's the only one I like kind of raised an eyebrow at. Like you got 3 centers and you extended Steven Adams. I think Houston might be looking back at this in the end and saying, man, I wish we brought in some shooting.
I think they want to have double bigs lineups even if there's injuries.
That's what I'm thinking too.
I think you look at the way of the league. But go on, yeah.
Really liked Memphis' offseason until Jaren Jackson hurt himself right after signing that extension. That team had no luck at all. But, bringing in Ty Jerome, Pope, Anthony, I mean, that's some depth there. And then the whole Milwaukee situation I just find very interesting. But yeah, teams have got better. The Clippers bringing in a backup center and Brook Lopez, a lot of size in LA. And the Damian Lillard situation is going to be really interesting because the team will be able to get him on the cheap, most likely, to see what happens there with him.
Yeah, and you've heard the Celtics mentioned as one of the 3 or 4 teams. I'm one of those people that is not very excited about that. To me, it's whatever. If you're going in this direction of just being mediocre, like he's going to be a 36-year-old guy coming off an Achilles who already couldn't play one end of the floor. So I don't know what he does for a team that isn't making an effort to be a championship team. So that's my takeaway on the Celtics. And then what you're going to say? 2027 is when you use him. What? He's 37 years old, coming off an Achilles as a small guard. I'm not. Whatever, and you would have to sign him this season, so you would have 2 roster spots that you can't use for a guy that's going to be 36 coming off an Achilles. Mike, I agree with all your takes on. I think Denver's offseason has been awesome. I think they've done a really good job.
Great backup center they brought in and Valanciunas. I mean, Atlanta bringing in Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard, I think, is some.
Atlanta's had a great offseason. And I think you've seen a trend around the league where, like, there is an emphasis on the center position and double bigs. And you talk about the area where the Celtics have failed and they have no centers. Everyone else has multiple good centers on their roster that they're not looking to trade. The trend in this league now is to do what the Celtics tried to start a couple seasons ago with Rob Williams and Al Horford. And you see Ime really buying into that down in Houston. You see in Kornet and Wemby. And it's a trend, Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns in New York. And you're just seeing it everywhere right now. And it's really interesting. And the Milwaukee stuff is fascinating because they basically re-signed all the guys and then brought in Miles Turner and let Brook Lopez go. So how much better, and they're minus Dame Lillard, so how much better they are than last season? I don't know. The East is weak. I think the undertold story, when we talk about the Bucks, is a lot of the reason they haven't reached their potential is because Giannis hasn't been on the court. It hasn't necessarily been how the team's been built. So I think that probably is still the key with them going forward, whether he's healthy and playing.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, Miles Turner is better than Brook Lopez, so I guess you could say there was an upgrade there. Turner had a great postseason up until the NBA Finals. When you look at, to me, it looks like Giannis is going to play the point forward this year, and they're going to try to surround him with athleticism and shooting, which has probably always been the best recipe. But that team, like I said it before, the injury that I always go back to is the Chris Middleton one. That was the one that kind of derailed them. That's the guy they're missing, and until they have some flexibility out in Milwaukee, that's going to be the guy they're missing for a long time.
Yep. No, I agree with you. And that probably cost him a back-to-back championship, his injury. You know, he wasn't available versus
They
Celtics.
took the Celtics to 7 games without him.
Yep. Mike,
Yeah.
any closing thoughts, any room for optimism with the Celtics team going forward?
Well, you still have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So you always have that. Oh, wow. The Cleveland Cavs got Larry Nance Jr.
Yeah, they retired him. Yeah.
That was a guy we used to love. He's only played like 30 games the last 2 seasons. Yeah, I don't know, Jim. I don't think there's a lot of optimism right now, if I'm going to be honest. I expect them to be bad. And I'm interested to see how Jaylen Brown reacts and what he says about this team in the middle of November next year at a press conference or something like that, because they have not surrounded him with much talent.
And I wonder how he feels about being on all these trade rumors and whatnot after everything he's committed here. And I think that would be an interesting conversation to have. And I'm hoping if this team does make a trade, and it is to get under the first apron, it's a combination of Simons and Niang. Even though it's not the best business in the world, I want players that can play with Tatum. And I don't think Simons is that guy, and I think Hauser is. So that's the direction I want to see him go. What's interesting is Al Horford still has not signed with the Warriors. And you got to wonder why that hasn't happened yet, because all the other centers are off the board, pretty much. I wonder what he's waiting for and who else he's talking to. I wonder if there's a surprise team out there that
I wonder if he's going to retire.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's going to retire. I mean, people talk about the Warriors. It's a good fit on paper, but he doesn't play every day. The Warriors don't have a center on the roster right now. I don't, unless they're making the trade to bring in another center with Al Horford, I don't see how it makes sense, because he's going to play 50 games.
And they're really going to be depending on a lot of old guys.
Yeah.
A lot of old guys.
The LA Lakers rumors, obviously I hate them, but after they signed Ayton, yeah, it makes sense for Al to go there. He wouldn't have to play every day. He could only play.
But what would he have to get the minimum there, though, at this point now?
Probably. So, yeah.
That might not be worth it for him. Because I don't think the Lakers are a championship team.
I would have said the Pacers, but with Halliburton hurt and Miles Turner gone, no, it doesn't make any sense to me anymore. OKC, that's the team that probably makes the most sense.
What about Orlando?
Do they have money in Orlando?
They got a little money.
Orlando makes a lot of sense because they have Wendell Carter there already, who he'll play every day.
You can really run a lot of good stuff between Alan Banchero and Alan Wagner from the point center position there.
Yeah, Al makes a lot of sense in Orlando. A couple guys I'm keeping an eye on that are still free agents that I thought the Celtics might target, especially late in the game now, with teams not having a ton of money. Wing out of LA, Amir Coffey is a solid player, shoots the ball well, and Mo Wagner. His value is really low right now coming off that injury. He's a really good player.
Yeah, it's some nastiness. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm interested to see where those two end up. And crazy, like Phoenix's off season just as bizarre. They're going into their 3rd straight season without a point guard. That's really like buying into you don't need a point guard to suck. I don't know what their plan is, but they don't think they need a point guard in Phoenix. It's like every year since Chris Paul, they don't need a point guard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, the only thing I'm going to close with is I believe this pod was pretty much ahead of everybody when talking about the first apron stuff. I didn't hear that out there until recently, and I think that's Celtics management giving that to reporters. But we were talking about this as something to flag and look out for after day one of this offseason. And it still is the biggest line in the sand that shows what they're going to be doing. And, look, we could be wrong. They could go below the first apron for different reasons this season and jump right back into things next season. And if we're wrong and they do that, then they get all the credit in the world, and we got to eat shit, and I'd be happy to eat shit at that point. So I guess we'll see. This offseason isn't done. There's another trade to happen. It's just a matter of how bad it's going to be. Like, I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think there's a good trade to be made with what they have to offer.
No, I'd like to see them.
You could sell the Hauser as good, but it won't be.
I'd like to see them move out, find a way to move on from guys like Tillman and guys like Davidson and guys like Cali Villanueva's son, what's his name? Jordan Walsh, to bring in some like these veterans that might be okay. Like, can Marvin Bagley play? Can Trey Lyles? He's a big who shoots threes. Can you give Bol, he's only 25 years old, a chance here in Boston? Like, I'd rather bring in guys who, like, maybe there's something there, and let's take a look at, like, Thomas Bryant looked pretty good in the playoffs at some points last year. He was good in Washington at one point. Like, is that a guy, if he played every day, that could be good? Like, he's only 27 years old. I'd rather, like, them take a look at actual NBA players and see these idiots out there running around. Like, Amir Coffey is a guy that I would be all over if I could get him.
Mike, I think for the center position, I think that's Gaza. I think that's who they targeted, and that's who they scouted, and that's who they think that guy is.
I think that's going to blow up in their face. All right.
I have no idea. I don't know what type of NBA player he is. I have no idea.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's going to be a rough season. All right, Jim.
All right. I'll see you.
Hey, I got a noise I'm going to make that's going to represent the Celtics off season. You ready?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Mike
I farted.
Right, yeah. See you.